Is Becky Lynch overrated? What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the review space. In this video, hold on, let me adjust my mic. Right. So in this video, I want to talk about, is the man, Becky Lynch, overrated? And I'm just talking about the character, the man gimmick specifically. Because, listen, she's probably the #1 babyface, good guy character right now in the WWE. And by default, the #1 character in professional wrestling. I'm talking about the #1 most currently popular or over with the audiences, and the one that's going to get that mainstream, main event, WrestleMania push. It's going to be Becky Lynch. You know, she is, in some ways, a female Stone Cold-esque character. She's not exactly like Austin, because #1, she's a girl, and #2, it's a different era. We're still in the PG era. We're still at a time when the product is still directly marketed towards a younger demographic and just very toned down. It's not the Attitude Era anymore, where people are allowed to be a lot more edgy. They're allowed to be using swearing, curse words, throwing the middle finger up, and having raunchy and suggestive themes in the show. That's not the case anymore with the WWE. They've become a lot more catered to family-friendly audiences, a very PG, very Disney-fied type of product. So, in some ways, or in a lot of ways, Becky Lynch is not as captivating, not as enthralling or interesting as Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I think that's where a lot of criticism that's directed towards Becky Lynch is that she's really not that great compared to the past. She's not as interesting as Austin, The Rock, Scott Steiner, these incredible either anti-hero or really cool babyface type of heroes back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2K. And she's basically just a more modernized PG version of that. A little bit more watered down, not as entertaining, not as captivating, and definitely nowhere near as groundbreaking as those other characters. So those criticisms, I think, is very valid. But as far as Becky Lynch herself, she does have charisma, she does have some personality, and she is likable, naturally. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about the Becky Lynch character even before the man came about and became the man thing. Becky Lynch was already likable. She already was kind of a cute, easy to root for hero, a babyface, good guy. She came across as, when she would have that, I guess you could call it steampunk look, or steampunk inspired gimmick, where she would have the goggles, she would have the outfit, the jacket when she'd come out. Sometimes she'd even have kind of a pseudo video game inspired attire, like her hair would be up, just like with that PS4 game, I forget what it's called, the PlayStation 4 game with that female redheaded character. And anyway, so she'd have the makeup on, not makeup, like face paint on her face with like a line across her face, whatever, so she looked really cool. She looked like she was cosplaying as current cool little video game references, or some kind of a steampunk reference, or a steampunk character. So she's definitely she's very nerdy. Her gimmick and her character was definitely fan friendly, and definitely gimmick and nerdy friendly. Becky Lynch was dope. I mean, I liked Becky Lynch all the way back in the day. I just thought that there was something about her. Even back when she first debuted on the main roster, immediately I was like, you know what? We don't really have a Lita character. You know what I'm saying? Like, back in the day, Lita was the cool chick, surrounded by all these different hot chicks and different types of women, whether it's Sable and Trish Stratus, these beautiful blonde chicks, but then here you have Lita, who is the dark-haired brunette with, she's got a bit more of a cool style to her, with the baggy pants. She's got the thong coming out from the back. It's visible thong, and she's got the kind of mesh-looking t-shirts, kind of like she's an alternative rocker. And she's hanging out, with the Hardy Boys as part of Team Extreme. So she stood out, and she was different from the other chicks. I think that Becky Lynch in some ways is kind of similar to that, to Lita, in that, not necessarily in terms of gimmick-wise, I think I've mentioned this already, but like, she has that uniqueness to her where she isn't necessarily Miss Blonde Bombshell. She doesn't look like, Mandy Rose. She doesn't look like Alexa Bliss. She doesn't look like Ava Marie. She doesn't have that absolutely glamorous, beautiful Playboy model look, but she's more down to earth, still pretty in the face, but she's kind of like a tough chick. She's very cool, and she's got that swagger about her that is like a tomboy. And I've mentioned this already in the Charlotte versus Becky Lynch comparison. So, is Becky Lynch overrated? I don't think... See, I think she's getting a big push right now just because WWE is missing so many hot characters. They don't have a lot of like interesting or captivating characters right now, and they've been missing that for a long time. So they don't have any like single individual that people can root for and be like super popular and be over. So fans will almost gobble up just about anything that kind of works out, kind of becomes a little bit popular, gets some steam, and the WWE may or may not roll with it. They may or may not roll with Elias. They may or may not roll with Rusev. They may or may not roll with the new NXT call-ups that are coming in, whether it's Aleister Black or whoever else is coming in from NXT that could become one day, a main eventer. Becky Lynch is one of the few NXT call-ups from way back when that is now at least getting some kind of push by the company. And now it's like there is some kind of momentum there where there's a little bit of that fan support, and she's got the merchandise going, and there is a bit of a buzz around her. Now, I don't think she's super popular. I don't think that she has crossed over to the mainstream where everybody's eyes is focused on her. I don't even think the average fan that is walking down the street, maybe the average wrestling fan, even really knows who Becky Lynch is. Or not the average fan, but the average person. She's not like... there's a lot fewer people watching wrestling. That's the thing. The WWE's ratings have fallen so much because their product overall has just been uninteresting. They haven't had any captivating storylines or compelling characters. So here you have Becky, who in a lot of ways feels like she's like a big fish kind of, or a medium to big fish in a small pond, even though the WWE is still the biggest game in town. They're still the biggest company technically in wrestling. They have a much smaller audience now in 2019 compared to 1999, 1998, the early 2000s, back when it was the Attitude Era, and they had a lot of edgy characters and a lot of, risque innuendo and women that were incredibly hot and doing Playboy and guys cutting like politically incorrect promos. People like The Rock making fun of people, and Austin throwing up the middle finger and stunning women. And it was incredible back then because they didn't care so much about PC stuff. They didn't cater to the SJW crowd. Now, in the modern times, in the 2010s, especially in 2019, the women's movement has really taken over in a lot of ways, but just because I think it's because the men's division too has become so weakened. You know what I'm saying? There's really no huge male stars anymore that is kind of like, the next Austin or the new version of The Rock, somebody who's like super popular. That doesn't exist anymore. There's no more like 1985 Hulk Hogan. There's no more 80s Hogan or Savage or Ultimate Warrior. There's no more of these incredible stars that feel larger than life. Guys like Goldberg in the late 90s, or even somebody like DDP, who was called, he's called the People's Champion. These guys are no longer around. That super popular single superstar. Every now and then you might see shades of somebody getting popular. You saw that a little bit with Dean Ambrose back in, I think it was maybe 2015 or 2016, when he was getting a pretty good reaction. It was like post-Shield. He was no longer in the Shield. He was doing his thing. And I remember, like, there was a few weeks in there where he was getting a huge pop from the crowd. and he was kind of popular. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a certain fan base for him, and people were really giving him a good reaction. So, but those kind of guys they're not really pushed to the top. Like Ambrose, we know what happened to him. He became WWE champ, but I mean, look at him. He's not even re-signing. Who knows what's going to happen to him? He might go to AEW. He might not even be in wrestling for a while. He might just end up quitting for a little bit, and just not be a wrestler anymore. There's no more huge stars. So when certain people like a Becky Lynch, who gets a little bit of a buzz, maybe somebody like Elias, maybe somebody like Rusev, maybe somebody like, this Daniel Bryan heel character, and he's an environmentalist, pseudo SJW type. That's all about being pretentious, and I'm better than everybody else because I care about the environment. But he's doing it in a way that makes him look like such a evil heel. Just I'm better, holier than thou. Some characters will have a buzz. Even right now with Kofi. Kofi Kingston is like back in business, kind of. You know what I'm saying? I'd like to see him main event WrestleMania this year. That'd be kind of cool. He was getting a pretty good reaction. Like, speaking of getting a decent reaction, the fans seem to like the idea of him main eventing against the WWE champion. Against Daniel Bryan at Fastlane. That got a good reaction from the crowd. I think it's a cool story. And it's not even like, oh, he's been around for 11 years or whatever. Yeah, he's been around for a long time, since 2008. I remember when he first came in, and that was kind of exciting. He was just Jamaican dude. He had a Jamaican gimmick back then. I'm from Jamaica, man. Kofi Kingston. And he had that fake Jamaican accent. I really thought he was Jamaican, actually, back then. And this was around the time of during the Beijing Olympics in 2008. I remember around the time he came in, it was kind of cool. You know what I'm saying? It was just, it felt different. Something was changing. And of course, nothing happened with Kofi. I think they tried to give him a push in 2009, and nothing came out after that, because like he got buried by Randy Orton. Randy Orton basically like got angry at him. You know what I'm saying? Started like cussing him out because Kofi ended up botching, a spot or two, and then Randy got so mad at him that ultimately that derailed any kind of main event push that Kofi was destined to be, or was destined for. So the fact that Kofi is now, after all these years, getting some good reaction, perhaps he might even become a main eventer. It's still possible. They could still put him in there. Maybe they're trying to test the waters right now, Yeah, he got replaced by Kevin Owens, but that's just a swerve by Vince McMahon. He wanted to kind of swerve the fans a little bit, and then, he replaces Kofi at Fastlane, and who knows, maybe at Mania he ends up main eventing. That's a possibility. I could be wrong, it might be just let's just completely forget about Kofi. He's not even going to be a main eventer, and it's going to be somebody else at WrestleMania. That's possible too, but you never know. You never know what kind of plans they have, because that's the cool part about wrestling. You never know who's going to end up in the WrestleMania WWE title picture in the next 5 or 6 months, really, the next couple of months. It's always a surprise. Well, sometimes it's a surprise. Sometimes you can see it coming from like 10 miles away. Like with Becky Lynch, you could see her winning the Raw Women's title from Ronda Rousey from a mile away. It's possible that she can lose. It's possible it might go to Charlotte. Ronda might end up retaining. Those things are possible too, but if Becky ends up winning the Raw Women's title, that's not surprising or shocking at all. It's like, it's almost destined to be. It's like, that's what they have as planned, because Ronda is leaving for a little bit. And I'm trying to answer this question. Is Becky Lynch overrated? I don't think. Maybe by the current fans. Maybe there's a small amount, a certain fan base that thinks she's as incredible as, let's say, Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock or something like that. They think that she's that popular. She's not. She's not that popular. She doesn't sell as many merchandise. She doesn't draw in as much casual audiences as any of those previous stars back in the day. compared to Hogan, compared to Austin, compared to Rock, compared to any of those people that were like the biggest stars in the company at the time. Becky isn't even, she's nowhere near that level. She's not selling as much merchandise. She's not selling as much, she's not raising as much awareness. She's not raising the ratings. Because the overall product is WWE. It's not so much about individual stars anymore. They're not really, this is the way this is the way that wrestling has become. This kind of, everything is about the brand. It's about WWE. It's about WrestleMania. It's about having that brand. And then every now and then you might have a somewhat popular star that the fans might get behind, but they don't really cross over too much into the mainstream. They don't bleed over into high mainstream status where they get everything handed down to them. I don't think, even, I mentioned this already before in the Charlotte versus Becky comparison, but I think after Mania, and when Becky Lynch ends up winning the women's title, the Raw women's title, her push is going to be derailed. They're going to hold her back a little bit. They're not going to give her everything. There's going to be so many, they're going to try to not make her get over as much as possible. They're already kind of doing that. Her momentum is already a little bit kind of, not her momentum, but her character. She's not as much of an anti-hero. She comes across more as she's become more, toned down a little bit. She's not as interesting or entertaining. She's not as gritty, where she's attacking everybody and she's completely unpredictable and very spontaneous. Now she feels a little bit more, I don't want to say watered down, but a little bit toned down. Like, she's definitely more of a baby face now. She's more of a good guy now, where there's certain things that, she'll apologize, for example, and she'll say certain things that you go, okay, well, she's trying to placate and try to play nice a little bit, whereas maybe, in her peak, the man gimmick, she might have been a super, super anti-hero where she just didn't care about anybody. She attacked anybody, babyface or heel, she went after everybody. But I don't think that's the case anymore. She's definitely more of a good guy, a goody two, well, not a goody two shoes, but she comes across more as somebody that will play by the rules, at least a little bit, instead of just like, I don't care about the rules, I don't care about it, like the way that Austin did it back in the day. Another big criticism is that's exactly what it is, copying something that's popular, copying something that worked in the past. The fact that she's basically, a lot of people are criticizing her for basically just ripping off Stone Cold Steve Austin, being a new age 2010s version of the Stone Cold character, which is a valid criticism, I think, because it's not original, it's not new, it's not really. I guess the most different thing about it is that she's a female. She's a woman that's doing the Stone Cold kind of character. I hate comparing the two because it's almost like you're denigrating her hard work, you're denigrating her talent, and Becky Lynch's natural charisma, and you're kind of saying, well, she's just a cheap ripoff. She's just a cheap knockoff, and she's not as good as Austin. And it's kind of like putting her down. It's like, well, she's just a crappy female, crappier version of Austin. Just a terrible knockoff. She's not as good as the past. She's not as good as the original Stone Cold character. It's true. It's true. She's a very PG version of the character, but it's something. At least it's a character that got over. It's a character that the fans reacted to. She's certainly a lot more over than, some of these other joke wrestlers they have on the main roster. People that can barely get any kind of reaction. For the longest time, like this guy can't get a reaction, or this woman. Look at Sasha Banks. Look at Bayley. They barely get any reaction anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like who? Dana Brooke. I like Dana Brooke. I think she's great. She's got a lot of potential, but she doesn't get any reaction. None of these people, they don't get any reaction because nobody cares. They feel so irrelevant on the main roster. because they're not made to feel important. Like every now and then they might get a win, or they might get like a small brief push. Like Sasha Banks will win the Raw Women's title, but then they'll take it off her after a couple of weeks. You know what I'm saying? And the same goes for the other females on there. And they're just kind of kept at a mid-level, mid to somewhat main event level, but like they get held back. And I think that's going to be the same thing with Becky Lynch. So even though she's ripping off Stone Cold Steve Austin at least a little bit and calling herself the man, the way that Ric Flair would call himself, to be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo! And she's, I guess that's a reference to Ric Flair. I'm not sure, but it probably is a reference to the man thing. That's a Ric Flair quote. It's like she's using other people's gimmicks or catchphrases or whatever, and she's getting over because of that. That's fine. Like, I don't really mind that. That's not a big problem to me, because if it worked in the past, I mean, you have somebody like CM Punk, you know what I'm saying, using Kenta's moves. I mean, most people are fine with that. You know what I'm saying? I remember, speaking of CM Punk, I remember when CM Punk was being called the 2011 version or 2012 version of Stone Cold. Like, oh, this guy's the new Stone Cold. He's the next Stone Cold. Like, he's the modern day Stone Cold. Back when he was going against the Authority and all that, and he was dropping the pipe bombs, speaking his mind, going against the McMahons and against Triple H and all that stuff, and doing basically what he wanted. So people thought he was a cool character, at least in that time. 2011, 2012, you know what I'm saying? Like, CM Punk was over. But even Punk was nowhere near as popular as Stone Cold. Yeah, he sold a lot of merchandise, no doubt. CM Punk sold way more merchandise than Becky Lynch. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people bought the CM Punk T-shirts way more than they bought the Becky Lynch T-shirts. So CM Punk had a much wider groundswell of support back in the day. But then you compare both of those people, Punk in his prime and Becky Lynch in her prime, compared to Austin in his prime, not even close. Austin was way above those two in terms of popularity. He sold way more T-shirts. He sold way more products and merchandise and video games and all that cool stuff. He generated a lot more buy rates and higher ratings in his prime, because Austin was perfect for the late 90s. You know what I'm saying? That late 90s Attitude Era, Jerry Springer era, very controversial, shock TV, crash TV, a lot of run-ins and chair shots and, middle fingers in the air and the whole crowd going crazy. The guy drinking beer and all that, pouring beer all over his face and, give me a hell yeah, and the whole crowd would be so into him. Austin was awesome. He's one of a kind. There's nobody that's going to be able to duplicate. Even somebody, got this fat idiot, this fat sack of crap named Kevin Owens. I remember when Kevin Owens, he started doing the Stone Cold Stunner. I think he finished off Daniel Bryan with a stunner. I'm like, oh my god. You know what I mean? And he actually won with that particular with that finishing move. Was it? No, I don't think it was Daniel Bryan. It might have been somebody else. Who did he finish off? I think it was Daniel Bryan. You're right. He did a tag team with Kofi. And Kevin Owens to me is just he just doesn't look like a main eventer. He looks so out of shape. I just can't get it. I can never fully get into Kevin Owens. I thought he was a very athletic, fat guy, definitely, and he can move for a guy his size, especially in ROH, where he came across as this bruiser type of character that he was just completely on a steamroll. He was beating up guys like El Generico and all that. That was great, but Ring of Honor was different. Ring of Honor, they make everybody feel special. Almost everybody on the roster, they feel important because the way that they book, especially back in the day when Kevin Steen was on the Ring of Honor roster. It was like 2010, 2011, something like that. He came across as a really important character, even though he wasn't necessarily fighting for the main event or for the ROH title until later on against I think it was Davey Richards. But he felt important. He had that year-long feud with El Generico and all that, and he came across as a cool different looking character. You know what I mean? His matches against Tyler Black and all that stuff. So, you know, Kevin Steen was great in Ring of Honor. You know, on the Indies, he was cool. He was easy to cheer for because he had a little bit of that edge to him. You know, he was able to cuss a little bit. He was able to kind of do more more risky moves. I mean, he used to have the package pile driver back in the day. And now I've never seen him do the package pile driver on either on NXT or on the main roster in WWE. His moveset has been completely watered down. You know, so Kevin Owens, I don't even care about him anymore. You know, I don't care if they gave him the Universal title. It's like, yeah, okay, but the Universal title looked like garbage when it was on Kevin Owens. You know, he got jobbed out to Goldberg. It was terrible. So I don't really care much about Kevin Owens. And him now doing the Stone Cold Stunner is a joke, you know what I'm saying? Because Austin did it the best back in the day. And he had certain nuances to it where he would do the middle finger thing, get up in his opponent's face and all that. So he did it in a more convincing and really cool way. Like he was more ruthless and more vicious. And then you got KO stealing that stunner, and it just looks so crappy and so B grade, you know, second rate. I don't know, man. I mean, if that's going to be his new finisher, that's terrible. That is so terrible, you know. And so, anyway, speaking of, you know, stealing gimmicks from Austin, Austin is definitely one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. So, very, very understandable that a lot of people are going to want to copy him and imitate him, from Kevin Owens and Becky Lynch and you know, maybe even a CM Punk, you know, the comparisons. And other people like Willie Mack, you know, remember Willie Mack does the stunner too. So many other wrestlers that try to be a Stone Cold-esque type of character, but, you know, there's only one Austin. So is Becky Lynch overrated? In my opinion, I don't think she is, because the product isn't really that highly rated to begin with. Like, Raw isn't highly rated to begin with. It's not that big of a show anymore. You know, it's not that important anymore. Even this WrestleMania this year, I think it's Mania 35 this year, I'm not even that interested in it. You know, I've been sick and tired of WrestleMania for the past like 5 or 6 years, probably more than that. Like every year, it's just become this generic big event, like with you know, big looking sets, but like the in-ring action and the storylines, it's just like doesn't feel that important. It doesn't feel that interesting. So, you know, Becky fighting against Ronda and maybe against Charlotte too at WrestleMania, I mean, that's cool for them. It's a cool, like, female first and a cool thing for the women and all that, but, you know, I just don't think that Becky is ever really in a position to be as big as she could be. You know, she could probably be as big as the past stars, somebody like a Rock or an Austin or a Hogan. It's possible if they booked like Ring of Honor, you know, or if they booked in a way that was like they made the characters feel a lot more important, but they don't. They're just kind of put in certain positions. Like, okay, for this year we're gonna have, you know, Shinsuke Nakamura against AJ Styles. You know, this year we're gonna have Chris Jericho against CM Punk. You know, for the WWE title. You know, and they just slot in certain people that they might have a little bit of a buzz coming in, a little bit of a momentum, but it's not that big of a deal in the end. They don't feel as big of a star as the past, because the WWE has lost so much viewership and a lot of fans over the years that the only people that really watch it now mostly are fat nerds, you know, these kind of SJW type guys, and you know, these kind of beta male type guys that are kind of nerdy and geeky, or just old people. You know, people that are in their 40s and 50s that grew up with it back in the day, in the 80s and early 90s, and even during the Attitude Era. So it's not that interesting anymore. And so, do I think that Becky Lynch is overrated? Not really. I don't think so. I do think that she's getting a big push just because she happens to be a somewhat big fish in a much smaller pond of wrestling. So she's one of the few that has some kind of buzz. I think it's cool. You know, do I think she's going to main event in the next 2-3 years or 5 years or whatever Mania? Most likely not. You know, she's not going to be it's just not. They don't push people like that anymore. It's not like with Austin. Austin would main event the next like 5 or 6 years when he became a main eventer. Same with The Rock, Same with Triple H. Same with Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. They don't make those big stars anymore. Now it's all about, we'll see who can fit in this year. Maybe next year it's going to be Rusev and Elias. And then the following year in 2021 it's going to be somebody else, Aleister Black and Ricochet or something like that. They just slot in, not random people, but somebody who's got a temporary small buzz at the moment. And that's exactly what Becky Lynch is. She's got a temporary buzz. Again, I think that she's a great she's a great wrestler, and she is. I like her. I'm a Becky Lynch fan. I definitely do like Becky Lynch, and she's sexy and all that. But it's just, the momentum of these wrestlers is just very temporary. They're not long term. I can imagine Becky Lynch being held back in the next 5 or 6 months, probably the rest of the year. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So she's not really like overrated in the sense that people think, oh, she's the greatest of all time, or that she gets pushed to the top or whatever. She gets all the attention and all that. I already made a top 10 most overrated wrestlers list a while ago, and I included a bunch of people on there that are definitely overrated, all the way from, Daniel Bryan and The Rock and Jeff Jarrett and Triple H and all that for various reasons, Rey Mysterio. Those are real overrated wrestlers. I think Becky Lynch, she's not even that highly rated to begin with. She happens to be one of the more popular single stars right now, especially with the women, so they've decided to run with it for the moment. So that's it for this episode of the Review Space. Thank you guys for watching, and subscribe to the channel and all that. Click on the bell button for the latest notifications. And until next time, peace.